back into the Berserk. Before we get into it though, I want to give a huge thank you to someone who sent in a lost episode of Please Dear God Don't Be a Bomb. Pretty much the rest of Berserk in deluxe editions. That is maybe the most insane gift a fan has ever given me. Oh my god, my jaw was on the floor, and Maddie, who was hosting the episode with me, didn't fully comprehend how crazy that was. I am so sorry that that footage was lost. I yanked the card in a weird way and the card physically broke. After recording 1,000 uses, apparently it was just a bit worn, or I'm just clumsy. Not sure which, probably a little bit of both. I was also given these fantastic dragons that are 3D printed on the shelf, a couple of pieces of Lord of the Rings art that were just gorgeous. I'll maybe do a special video that I'll put here in a short where I can kind of show everything that was given, but really from the bottom of my heart, I just want to apologize. It means so much to me when people send stuff in. If you're the person who sent me the Berserk or the dragons or really anything I opened in that episode and would like to get in touch with me, just send proof that you're the person who sent the thing, and I would love to send you a personal thank you. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into Berserk Deluxe Edition 3. So we're gonna pick up pretty much exactly where we left off because I ended the last Berserk video kind of in the middle of a story. So we've seen Guts and Casca are alone in the woods trying to survive. And Casca is telling the story of how she came into the Band of the Hawk. And I know this is the stupidest thing ever, but I always think of it as Hawkins from Stranger Things. And now I'm just picturing like the crew from Stranger Things trying to survive in the Berserk world. They'd all die. But Casca shows a very aware sense of her view of Griffith. She knows she idolizes this man in a way that probably isn't healthy, but because of her past, it's something she clings on to. Someone who is smart enough to realize what's going on, but Griffith has proven himself to be this incredible leader in a lot of sinister-ish ways. And so yeah, it's a place of strength that she is able to commit herself to and be loyal to in a world that doesn't provide stability. And this chapter also does a great job of really showing the appeal for the followers of Griffith, even more so than we've already seen to this extent, because it talks about how young and charismatic and straight up beautiful he is, as well as having this incredible record of success with his army, and having an origin that means he's a commoner. He isn't a noble, royalty, any of that. This is just a guy with incredible ambition. And Jesus, if you look back at history, there have been a lot of people who, when they come up from the bottom, the people who see themselves as coming from a similar origin flock to them as a beacon of hope for their own rise. But this quickly turns into a little bit of the darker side of this psychology, because eventually Casca starts talking about the fact that Griffith did pledge the band to someone who would be able to fund them, except this leader had a harem of young children. Okay, huge trigger warning for this chapter, by the way. I'm just gonna put big old R-word trigger warning as well as pedophilia. This is going to be possibly demonetized. Yay, Berserk. But yes, this king had a harem of children, and this physically repulsed Casca, as it absolutely should have, and does me myself. Reading Berserk is fascinating, but not fun. But she talked about how this wasn't Griffith's ideal either, and then we even cut to showing Griffith finding a child who was with the band on a battlefield, and Griffith is clearly really torn up by the fact that this kid died. He is somberly mourning this child who had a doll of a knight and clearly looked up to the actual adult members of this war band, and this is kind of planting the seeds of the ambition that caused Griffith to turn into what he is now. Because in this flashback, we're jumping back a while, I get the feeling that Griffith, while he's definitely still dangerous and someone I would not align myself with, he isn't nearly the fanatic we see at the point where we're picking up with Guts. But seeing children die for him and refusing to realize that his own ambitions, his own warmongering is leading to a lot of this death, though the death would be happening regardless. So there's a very nuanced discussion that could be had there. This whole flashback is really just getting into his descent into being the man we see now, who is just,
I will burn the world to achieve what I want to achieve.
And part of that process is justifying the horrors he witnesses in front of him, and we see Griffith's continual one-note beat on a drum of just, I need, must, have to accomplish what my ambitions are because it'll be for the better of everyone, no matter what. He does show awareness of maybe it was my dream that killed this boy, but that sure doesn't stop him. But Casca then, a bit later on, back within the castle that, this band is operating out from this time, sees Griffith actually go to bed with the king who has that harem of children. Oh my god. Jesus. This is, moving on. Now this actually upsets Guts, and you understand why. Like, Guts idolizes Griffith as well, and so hearing this is shaking Guts more than he's already been shaken from his loyalty to Griffith. But the next morning in this flashback, Casca sees Griffith bathing in a river, and Griffith is clearly not doing great because Casca kind of turns away from him in disgust, quite frankly, at least that's how it struck me, and Griffith notices this and says, hey, come join me. What am I, dirty? Like, he's trying to show that what he's done is worth it. He tries to justify it by saying, I'm actually saving lives by doing this because it means this ruler is going to finance our army more, which will save lives. And like, you're not wrong, dude, but Jesus. And we see this has affected Griffith so much that he begins clawing into his own arms and bleeding out, beginning to show some very serious psychosis. Is that the right word? I think so. I mean, this panel, wow. If you need evidence of Griffith's descent, it's happening right here in front of you. And you can obviously connect A to B to C of Griffith talking about his ambitions, a child dying for him, and now you can see him going to extreme measures to try and minimize as much death that's going to happen in this time. Obviously, we've seen that he's still fighting constantly. This funding, arguably, in my opinion, from what I've seen, has just mean he's elevated the type of battles he's going into, and arguably is surrounding himself with more death. And that's the unfortunate consequence of people who try and do things to actually avoid problems, maybe pull at angles where they protect those around them. In the reality, what you're often going to do is accidentally escalate, accidentally affiliate and tie yourself to people who will put you in worse situations. And it seems that's exactly what Griffith has done. And it could also be seen as a manipulation of Casca, because Casca, of course, sees this self-harm and go, wow, self-harm too. Trigger warnings left, right, up, down. Good Lord. And she hugs him and comforts him, obviously now feeling sorry and entirely shifting what she saw Griffith doing. And that could be Messina's manipulation, or it's genuine. Honestly, with Griffith, I can't tell. Although with this man, I tend to lean manipulation. And Casca's takeaway from this encounter kind of comes down to something she says to Guts as she's recounting these events. And that is, I think that someone who wants to accomplish something grand endures that much more than other people. It's not that he's strong. Griffith has to make himself strong. If his dream is to fight and cut away his own path, then I want to be his sword. So we've clearly seen outline now, one, an angle of Griffith that further realizes the overall picture that's presented to us in current times, and now we better understand exactly why Casca was so loyal to him, though I have a feeling, a prediction, that's gonna start being shaken. There's something in my gut that tells me Casca's gonna end up paying a very high price for Griffith's dream, and that's what's gonna send Guts after him in what we saw as the beginning of Berserk. The Casca begins talking to Guts about the day they met, and actually how Griffith, after seeing him fight so fiercely, said, I want you, which those words were something that she said she had never heard from Griffith before, and it made her immensely envious of Guts, something that we've seen be kind of not even subtly, just kind of overtly a part of her character throughout, now being directly addressed and stated. But she then switches to anger, really intense anger at Guts for constantly acting in ways she sees as non-beneficial to Griffith's vision, his dream, putting members of this band that they fight in at risk, and it's because of his selfishness, his bloodlust, and this kind of pushes Guts back a little and totally justifies what his decision is towards the end of this latter bit, but we're gonna get into that in a minute. I mean, she genuinely has tears of anger, and probably also caused by internal conflict, as she is pushing Guts down and screaming at him for being a selfish warrior on the battlefield. That is also setting up the intense emotions between these two, and it's kind of obviously hinting at a possible romance, at least that's how it's striking me. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if it'll ever fully become realized, but there's definitely a lot of entangled emotions between these two that could be used to justify Guts having a very visceral reaction to Casca paying a high price for Griffith's vision. But then all of this is interrupted because story must happen, and there are people hunting for the bodies of Guts and Casca because they assume they died after falling from the cliff. They didn't know that it's Guts, and Guts fears no height. And apparently neither does Casca. The enemy army has been given a bounty by their leader, and the bounty is quite high to bring back the bodies of Casca and Guts, alive or dead. So they hide, they dry their clothes, they get back in their armor, and they begin trying to march back toward their camp. And a whole lot of action occurs, which I can't really go like panel to panel of like he hits his head, he stabs him in the mouth, but there's just a lot of that stuff, because as they're marching through the woods, they are then ambushed by at least 100 men from the enemy army. And Casca is still dealing with menstrual problems, which is just stated throughout the book repeatedly, and so she's not exactly in a place to fight. It's rare to see something like this addressed in a fantasy series. I've personally dated people who have dealt with menstrual problems that are on the level where it physically debilitates them, so it's kind of cool to see that represented accurately, at least from what I'm seeing Casca's reaction to. That was accurate to the level of pain that the people I was dating would be in when they experienced something similar, so representation. Cool. But Whale Guy is leading this ambush, and Guts is having to deal with the bulk of the fight. And we actually see definitely Guts cares about Casca, because there are crossbows fired at her, and Guts puts himself in the way of it. There are threats leveled against Casca, and Guts responds angrily to them, like, no, you will not get a hold of her, you will not kill me, I will butcher the lot of you. And spoiler alert, he does. Guts does eventually convince Casca to leave, because he says, look, you're going through this pain, you're not going to be that much use to me right now, get help. And so I wish Casca actually was being able to shown to fight a little bit more, but I also get it's justified within the story of what she's experiencing, that she really can't right now. So she then runs off, and she has an encounter with some soldiers where they, threaten the R word, she fights back, and then also reinforcements arrive. They then rush back to try and help Guts, expecting a battle against 100 men, except, holy shit, Guts has killed all of them after being riddled with arrows, Boromired like a motherfucker, and fighting against like super soldiers where the Whale Guy was like, here's our super strong, even bigger than me badass guy. Guts just decimates all of them. I get why Griffith went, I want you on my side. Guts, even this early on, is a machine of murder. And when they finally find Guts, he's leaning against a tree like this, just, I did it. That was a lot of murder, guys. This is quite a, did you see all that? That's 100 dead dudes. Me, big sword. I eat my vegetables. That's the takeaway, kids. If you want to be a murderer like Guts, eat your broccoli. I would like to see Guts' workout routine and diet. I imagine he just lifts like entire pigs and just starts munching, and that's the workout and the food. Establishing this did cause Guts to actually have to pay quite the high price. He is brought back into camp on a stretcher. He's not in great shape, so this is a little bit of like an insane leap for Guts' achievements so far, but it's not that crazy because we've just seen him be such an effective killer. Like, part of me is like, really, 100 dudes? But the other part of me is like, yeah, 100 dudes. Especially because it is also established these are not super well-trained soldiers overall. Like, a lot of them are just kind of charging blindly at Guts. The leader at one point even has to says, stop attacking him 2 at a time, like, get in there, cowards, which is also implanting the idea in my head, like, this isn't the biggest challenge because these are probably just like conscripts with very minimal training. Of course, Guts though is like, I'm not that hurt, let me up, I'm fine, you don't need to put me on a stretcher. And everyone's like, you're making your wounds worse, sit down, you crazy bastard. And it's noted, like, most people would have passed out from blood loss. Guts is just so angry, I guess, that he's like, nah, I need 1 drop of blood and I'm good to go. I'll pump that all around, it's fine, it keeps me going. But Casca's actually pulled away and told that while her and Guts were gone, Griffith stood up to a bunch of nobles who were saying, we can't risk sending off people and sparing troops to find these two, but Griffith said, absolutely not, they are vital, both of them, and we will find them both no matter what. Which obviously with her devotion to Griffith means a lot to her, and while she may have been a bit rattled recently with, hearing Griffith give that speech to the princess, I imagine this undoes a lot of that damage, seeing that she's in that approval line. We also see that this name, honestly, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry, let me know in the comments down below, says she has some fairy dust and gives it to Casca to give to Griffith to help with his wounds. Casca then finds Griffith away from the camp in the coolest spot, trying to deal with, imagine, a mild fever due to his injuries, which is actually a fun detail. I've had those kind of fevers before where you just want to get away from everyone and get in the cool air and relax and let what I also imagine imagine is quite a bit of anxiety out. I could be wrong, this is purely conjecture, but a lot of what I've seen from Guts aligns with severe anxiety. He has a lot of repressed anxiety and depression that comes out in anger, and some people do seek out stimulation of extreme kinds because it helps them feel something outside of that anxiety. Exhibit A right here, I used to do that, and it's also resulted in me having some mild anger management issues that I'm currently trying to address. And I kind of see that in Guts, though maybe I'm just projecting from something that I'm currently trying to deal with. I'm not entirely sure, but it seems like a good representation of that if that's the case. But he's trying to cool down from that extreme stimulation, battling 100 people. And it's why even when he was in the tent, wounded, surrounded by friends, he was still screaming, "Let me up, let me out," because feeling crowded, feeling like there's people dealing with you is the worst thing in that time. But Casca begins applying this medicine to Guts, and they begin talking about everything they went through, and Guts reveals that he kind of wants to leave. He's no longer feeling like he's a part of this band, and while they're talking about how every flame down there is its own person, its own ambition, its own dream, it's all being utilized by Griffith's blaze, his just incredible push, his desire, and Guts no longer really feels connected to that, and I imagine it's because of a lot of things that have been revealed to him. He's also trying to find his own purpose, and it's this incredible growth for Guts. Like, it's so nice to see this guy who was just looking to be a tool for someone to be used finally go, no, I need to find my own purpose and find happiness myself. And that's beautiful, though looking back at what we started with, doesn't seem like that's necessary. Or maybe, no, his mission's going to be to hunt Guts, or hunt Griffith, it seems. That's going to be his. I'm excited to see how we get there. But he does say he will stay until the end of the campaign, which does line up with who he is. He's not going to abandon his comrades. Well, he is a bit of a selfish fighter. Guts has been shown to really care for those around him in real ways. While he's not good at showing it, his actions definitely speak louder than his words. And obviously what he's went through with Casca, his repeated saving of other people, he does give a shit about nearly everyone in this crew. I just think he has extraordinarily mixed emotions about Griffith at this point. And Casca, to her credit, keeps a secret. We see Casca beginning to apologize to Griffith, saying it's her fault. Guts kind of shuts her up in a little bit of a chauvinist way. Guts is a little bit of a sexist. He shows that repeatedly throughout this chapter, but, you know, he's a very flawed character, so that just kind of lines up with who he is. God, I love a good flawed character. It's refreshing. This story ends with a cliffhanger because we cut back to the castle and we see that there is a very skeletal force left guarding there, and on the way is the biggest, baddest mofo we have seen yet, with the spikiest armor yet. That's how you know it's for cereal. Look at them spikes! Those are some spiky boys. I do love how Berserk establishes threats by just adding more like flamboyant and extra villains who are just super decorated and over the top. It's kind of fun. That is where this one is ending. And this is probably in my top 3 bits of Berserk yet. I almost just said One Piece. That's hilarious, because this was just a wonderful examination of the current state of these two characters' psychology and a further explanation and exploration of the psychology of their leader, which is, in my opinion, where Berserk shines the brightest. So, hells to the yes, I am 100% down for that, and I am quite excited to see what comes next. I have really enjoyed taking my time and going through Berserk slowly and making these more detailed videos, so thank you everyone who is being patient and along for the ride, and we will be continuing this next week. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. I got books, I got merch, and have a good one, y'all. Peace.